Hi, I'm Lauren from Lauren Taylor Made, and I'm excited to be here at Scrapbook.com to show a brand new product to Scrapbook.com called Pretty Pink Posh. I'm going to show how I made this card using brand new products from Pretty Pink Posh, as well as some Scrapbook.com exclusives. So I'm going to be starting with my background, as that needs the longest time to dry, and I'm using this new Pure Snowflakes A2 cover plate with some Neenah Solar White cardstock. I'm going to be cutting it with our Spellbinders Platinum 6 and our Magic Mat. Here you can see the beautiful pierced details of the snowflakes from this cover plate die. So now I'm going to be using the new layered candy cane stencil. One of my favorite things about Pretty Pink Posh are their layered stencils. This particular one has an A and B, so we can do our candy canes in a color, and you can also stencil on the details of the candy cane. So I'm going to be starting with the A stencil. It's here in the lower corner. You can see it says Layered Candy Canes A. I'm going to be using our grip mat so I can do ink blending as well as some stenciling with Cloud Whip. And my favorite thing to do when using layered stencils is adding my mint tape to the back as well, because it will help me with making sure it is lined up perfectly in this stencil. And I'm going to be using Lumberjack Plaid Distress ink with our blending brush. And I don't want it to be too dark, so I'm just going to take off some of the ink before I start blending, and I'm going in with a really light hand because I don't want my candy canes to be too dark red. And my favorite part about stenciling is, of course, the stencil reveal. So here we have our first layer of our candy canes. And now I can bring in my second layer, and these line up perfectly, but since my paper is smaller than 6 by 6, I'm just going to use the details of the candy canes to help me line up this second stencil. And my mint tape stayed perfectly in place, and I can keep reusing it. I don't know if you're like me, but I reuse my mint tape until it is no longer sticky. For my second layer with the B stencil, I'm going to be using Scrapbook.com's Cloud Whip. And this is a great base for mixing other types of mediums like re-inkers, pops of color, but I'm going to just be using it by itself for today's card. So I'm peeling off the seal. Make sure you always keep this. It helps keep your Cloud Whip in good condition. So this is a brand new Cloud Whip. So it does look a little dry, but this is just so you can add in other mediums without losing the texture or it becoming too runny. So Cloud Whip is a thicker consistency. Again, it is designed to be used with other mediums. So I'm just going to keep playing with it because I want this thicker texture through my stencil, so I have some dimension in my background. So I'm going to add it to the top of my stencil here, and then I will drag it down through the stencil with my scraper. And I'm just picking up the paste with my scraper as I go down and then applying it lower on the stencil. And that's how we'll get it to spread through the whole stencil. Just moving my cloud whip around, make sure it gets through all of the areas on the stencil. Okay, so let's see how our stenciled image looks. And there you can see the detail. I wanted the texture on my card. You can see the candy canes, the red with the white. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up, and you always wanna make sure you wash your stencils right away so you don't have to worry about buildup on your stencils. So in order for it to dry, you can set it aside or you can use a heat tool to dry. I have one that I've already made that's dry, and you can see the detail of the cloud whip on our candy canes. So now we're going to move into die cutting our pieces for our mug, and I'm going to be using some different Scrapbook.com smooth cardstock, pattern paper, and glitter paper. I'm going to be using the Noel pattern collection to cut out my Christmas mug. So from the Noel pattern collection, I'm going to grab some different pattern cardstocks. And we're going to do the red with the darker red details and this candy cane striped pattern. So I'm going to be using the mug from the Winter Mug die set from Pretty Pink Posh. And what I love about these die sets is that you have your winter mug base, and then there are lots of different add-ons from Pretty Pink Posh to build more with your mugs. So we're going to get the mug, our little coffee drink, and our candy cane. And there is actually a second die, so you can die cut your base of your candy cane as well as our small details. And the little perforated lines here is where you would line up those details. But since I'm using our candy cane striped pattern paper, I'm just going to use the base die on its own. So I'm going to cut my mug out of this red pattern paper, and we're going to cut it twice because we're going to make a shaker, and we need it for the front and the back of our shaker. So I will bring back our magic mat. I'm going to run it through a second time. So I'm using mint tape to hold my die in place since I have just the perfect amount of room on my paper, and that way I know it will stay in place when I run it through the die cut machine. Get my tray so I can make sure I keep all my pieces together. And for the coffee or tea or hot chocolate, I'm going to be using the Boho paper pad. I'm going to choose this darker brown. And we'll run our candy cane through the same time. I'm going to be making a shaker window with one of my mug dies, so I'm going to use the Fruit Mug Editions. There's a little window die in this collection for your mug. And grab my mint tape, and we're just going to center it onto the front of our mug and use our mint tape to keep that in place. Ooh. And then there's a few more details I want to die cut from our Valentine mug editions. There's this really cute little dollop of whipped cream, little swirl of whipped cream. And we'll use our scrap from cutting our A2 cover plate to cut that out. And there's also in the brand new holiday mug edition, we have a Santa hat and a really cute Santa belt. And all of the pieces that layer together are in one die, so you know which pieces go together within the die set. So I'm going to run this through as well. And I want my Santa hat to be in red, so I'm just going to make sure to die cut this out of the back side of our patterned paper we use for our mugs. And again, limited on space, so make sure I use my mint tape. We're going to use our mixed metals for our Santa belt, and for cutting out the mixed metals, I'm going to bring in my cutting plate for the platinum machine. So for the Santa belt, I would like to use black, and for the belt buckle, we're going to use gold. So I'm going to run my belt through on the black, and then I'm also going to bring in my sentiment. This is the Merry Christmas shadow die set. So we have a detailed script of Merry Christmas as well as the shadow, so you can layer them together and have a shadow behind your sentiment. So we'll just do these at the same time. So just a reminder, you do need both of your cutting plates when cutting the glitter cardstock. Because of the film on the back of the glitter paper, you need the second harder plate to cut. But what's great about this glitter paper is that it doesn't come off. It's on the paper, it doesn't flake in any way. So we have our belt. So I'm just being very careful in taking out my die as these, or my die cut, as these are very thin die cuts with the script sentiment. So I'm just going to be extra careful so I don't rip my sentiment. So I've finished getting my sentiment out of my gold cardstock, and then I also went ahead and ran my belt detail out of the same gold glitter paper. And I also have my shadow Merry Christmas in white cardstock. So now we can get to putting our die cuts together. So I'm going to start with my shaker. And we will need some acetate for our shaker. So I'm going to take a sheet of our Scrapbook.com acetate. These are the smaller 5x6 sheets. And I like to just kind of guess how much I need. I'm not a very precise cutter when it comes to my acetate, since you don't see it, it's on the back side. So I'm just going to layer it behind where I know my window needs to be, and just use some scissors to trim where my acetate will need to be on the back side of my mug. And I'm going to grab my 1/8 of an inch double-sided adhesive tape, and I'm going to layer this around our window on the back of the mug. So I'm going to use a poking tool to help peel off the release paper. So while I'm peeling all this off, I'd love to know in the comments if you have heard of Pretty Pink Posh before. I absolutely love this small company. Paulina, the owner, she's so sweet. She's in the Seattle area. And I've actually known her virtually for a really long time. So I'm so excited to be able to share some of her products with you today. And I'm so excited that you can shop Pretty Pink Posh now at Scrapbook.com. So I'm putting my acetate window now on the back side of my shaker window. And I'm going to be grabbing the brand new 3mm thick foam adhesive available at Scrapbook.com. And I'm going to trim it down to a little bit thinner just because I don't have a lot of room around my shaker. Grab larger scissors to be able to cut this a little faster. And I love using the 3mm foam because it's a little thicker for shaker cards. So I have more room to be able to add in sequins with more dimension. And the 3mm thickness just makes sure that none of my shaker bits get stuck in my shaker window. So what I like to do also for shaker cards is actually peel off both sides of the release paper, and that allows me to be able to kind of curve my foam while I'm placing it on my shaker card. And you want to make sure that you always butt up your foam adhesive so none of your shaker elements will fall out of your shaker. And one more large piece for the top. And then I also want to add a thinner piece around the handle of my mug. So I'm going to peel off all my release paper so that way I can be ready to attach my layers of my shaker card together after I put in my new shaker beads. These are the glass shaker beads from Pretty Pink Posh. They are also brand new, and I love them for shaker because they are beads, but also they make really great sounds when you shake them. This is how the packaging comes from Pretty Pink Posh, and you can see the name of the beads. I've already opened up my Christmas cookie shaker beads, and I'm just going to pour some into my little shaker well. And now the careful part is making sure you line up your mugs together to close up your shaker. So I'm going to use the handles as a guide to make sure it's lined up. And then give it a good press. And there we have our little shaker mug. So now let's work on decorating it. So we're going to add our little pieces here, and I'm going to grab the Artiste glue. So I'm going to grab my glue, and we're going to start with adding in our coffee or hot chocolate or chai, whatever you like in your holiday mugs. So I'd love to know what your favorite holiday drink is. So what would be inside your Christmas mug? I'm going to add my candy cane, but I just want it to look like a little stick of candy, so I'm going to trim off part of it. And before I glue it down, I'm going to grab my whipped cream and see, I'm going to cut it a little shorter. So glue this down. And then we'll add our Santa hat. And then our little details of our Santa hat. And then our final details are our Santa belt. And I'm going to use some double-sided adhesive tape for the belt, just because there's acetate there, and I like to use Scrapbook.com's adhesive rolls to glue directly to acetate. Get that centered. And then same for our belt buckle. There we have our little Christmas Santa mug. Here we have our cute little shaker with all of our details inside. And I love adding just fun little toppers with all the different mug add-ons from Pretty Pink Posh. So for gluing the layers of my sentiment together, I'm going to bring in my Artiste glue with the fine point tip and my tweezers to add the adhesive on the back of the gold letters to layer onto the white shadow pieces. So I have my adhesive on the back side of my Mary, and I'm going to use my tweezers to help me hold it in place while I line it up on the shadow die cut piece. And I love using liquid glue for these little dainty sentiments because it gives me time to get it lined up perfectly on the shadow. All right, and we'll do our Christmas sentiment. Get this lined up. Can't forget the little tittle of the eye. So I'm going to actually do my glue first on my shadow, and then we'll add the little die cut. And then we'll add that right on. Use our little pokey tool to get it lined up. Okay. So now we have all of our elements ready to go, and we can assemble our card together. So I'm going to get all of my pieces now ready to go. We have our card base, our card front, our shaker, and our sentiment, so we can finally start gluing everything together. So I'm going to grab my favorite tape runner. I absolutely love the dotted adhesive roller, and we're going to make sure it says top on top and add our adhesive to the back of our A2 cover. And when I line up to my card base, I like to make sure it's lined up to the fold of the card. So just in case I didn't get my card base cut perfectly, I can always trim off anything. And I'm going to add our shaker. Now, some of my pieces are not going to be touching the card, so I'm going to grab a little bit more foam adhesive to make sure they stay nice and secure on my card. So we'll just trim the same thickness, the 3mm thick foam, to fit behind our die cut pieces so they're nice and stable. And I'm going to place my sentiment so I can see where my mug will fit. I will overlap just a little bit, so looks like it will fit nicely there. Grab place our shaker mug on, and a little more foam adhesive. I love foam adhesive. I love adding dimension to anything I can. And again, this is our 3mm foam, so it will be the same dimension and height as our shaker. Add our Christmas, and before I press down, make sure I know where my Mary's going to sit. That looks good. And then our Mary will overlap just a tiny bit, so I'm actually going to use our Artiste glue to adhere it down, but I will add a little bit of foam where that Y is. And I'm just going to add the glue where it will overlap with my shaker. Then for some final touches, my favorite part is adding pops of color. And I already have my card on a card base. I don't know if you're like me, but I get really excited about adding pops of color, and then I forget to put it on a card base first. So I'm just going to add them around the card, just where I think it will look nice. Just add a little bit more shine throughout the card. And then I like to tap on the inside of my card to kind of dome out my pops of color to give it more of an enamel dot look. And that is our finished card. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Scrapbook.com YouTube channel. You can find all the brand new products from Pretty Pink Posh over at Scrapbook.com, and of course all of the links are below in the description. I hope you enjoyed this Christmas card, and I can't wait to hear in your comments what your favorite product is from their latest release.